40 days. Zelensky gave exactly 40 days for the Russian Federation to feel the full force of long-range sanctions. How would you assess these 40 days? Well, aside from the fact that the symbolism in this number already speaks volumes, but we saw how things burned, how they exploded, how shipments didn't go through, how things didn't work out. What was the most effective part of these 40 days?
I think the main result of these 40 days can be considered Ukraine's return to destroying oil refineries. Because the destruction of oil refineries and depriving Russia, the task of depriving Russia of fuel, is the most effective thing that can be done in this strategic Ukrainian aerial offensive. In an aerial war, the most painful point for Putin, for a country at war, is fuel. It's the supply of diesel, aviation kerosene, and regular gasoline to industry, agriculture, public utilities, and all other consumers. I think that based on the results of these 40 days, the relevant services and analysts in Ukraine will conclude, or rather, I already understand that they have concluded, that the primary and most effective target is oil refining. Because we saw how, when shifting the focus of drone systems and the relevant defense force units to other targets, yes, other effects arise, and they are also very important. This is, as Zelensky said, to make every resident of the country feel that the war is not somewhere far away, but right under their nose. And this hits the wallet. This hits the usual way of life. This is the goal that is achieved by strikes on wild berries, on logistics hubs, and so on. But a full scale crisis in the national economy, if you can call it that, is caused by the lack of fuel. And now we see that Ukraine has returned again in the last 10 days, let's say, to the destruction, the quite active destruction of the refineries that you listed, including the Ufa group of enterprises, the Samara, Volgograd, and other plants. This has all brought the fuel crisis back to Russia. Now, I can tell you how this looks from the inside, from the perspective of the average person in the Russian Federation. But this time, this return of the crisis has a completely different quality. It's not like what it was in May to June, let's say, right? When there wasn't that cumulative effect yet, when there were still some response measures in reserve. Now, when Ukraine has taken out several large enterprises in a week, suddenly in Lipetsk, for example, I wrote about this today on my Telegram channel, they admitted that the odd-even system won't be turned on this time because it's ineffective. Right now, in the current conditions, rationing fuel among car owners by odd and even days won't yield any results anymore because, pay attention, there simply isn't any fuel. That is the fundamental difference from the situation in June and May. I repeat, when there was fuel in some places and not in others. In some places, the problem was that it was being bought up too quickly, and it was just necessary to organize this process of fuel withdrawal by car owners from specific gas stations. Such measures worked. But now the governor of the Lipetsk region clearly states, no, we will no longer introduce odd-even rationing because it is useless. And it's useless because there simply is no fuel. And this needs to be clearly heard, this statement, analyzed and understood. What exactly happened this time that didn't happen, for example, in June? And why strikes on oil refining now could potentially finish off Russia's economic system. Because, I'll repeat again, there were some reserves somewhere, there was some diesel in the pipeline, at oil storage facilities, at oil depots. Yes, there was something somewhere it was possible to solve the problem by redirecting surpluses here and there. That's why the regulation in this paperwork administration yielded some results. Now, when Ukraine has returned and intensified its efforts in weekly terms, there was nothing like this even in June. In terms of the total removal of oil refining capacity, there wasn't a single week like the one we've had at the beginning of August now, not even in June. That is the fundamental difference. If this continues, if the relevant analytical units of the armed forces of Ukraine see this, then I think that will be the main result of these 40 days. We've tried everything, back and forth. tankers, wild berries, oil refining, ports, something else, something else. But suddenly it turns out that what matters decisively is whether there's fuel in the Lipetsk region, whether the Lipetsk region is implementing an odd-even rationing plan. Well, the Lipetsk region is no longer implementing it, and the governor is stating this openly. The second signal is jet fuel. Change in safety standards for fuel is simply a red flag. Russia has gone ahead and lowered the standards for freezing point, right? Meaning now they're going to add all sorts of swill to the fuel, and planes won't be able to fly, for example, at minus 60, but will be forced to fly only at minus 50. Just a reminder, we're not talking about the temperature on the ground. We're talking about cruising altitudes, because the temperature is much lower up there, and winter is coming. And problems related to the shortage of aviation kerosene won't just be, resolved somehow. For example, I'll give you a figure right now. Russia needs an average of 1 million tons of aviation kerosene. 1 million tons. That means Russia needs 30,000 tons of kerosene, plus or minus, aviation kerosene per day. It's physically not there. It's physically not there right now. There's nowhere to buy it. On the global market, many countries are hunting for aviation kerosene. There's no surplus aviation kerosene available, not even in volumes of 10 or 15,000 tons a day. And that means that air travel in Russia will either come to a halt at some point, stop completely, or air travel will simply become a game of Russian roulette. When a person gets on a plane, they won't just be praying as usual, but will be ready to prepare their shroud right away. Maybe call their relatives, write a will, because flying will be dangerous with these standards, with the addition of sulfur, with the addition of additives, with the increase of all these non-standard components that will now be in the fuel. And I can tell you many, many more examples like this. Why have oil refineries across Russia, in the Kurgan region, the Kaliningrad region, the Oriol region, started being put up for sale for next to nothing? I also wrote about this on my Telegram channel just the day before yesterday. Why? It would seem that fuel is worth its weight in gold. Go ahead, buy the oil refineries. Putin said, we're going to cover the entire country with a network of mini refineries as a solution. There it is, the solution. And we see that the market is reacting in the opposite way. The market is getting rid of oil refineries for any price at all. Right now, the discount on those 4 refineries I wrote about is 40%. 40. And the real transaction price, if there are any deals at all for these oil refineries, I think will be 15 to 20% of their actual market value. You have to stop and think, why is this happening? In Lipetsk with jet fuel with the sale of oil refineries. Could it be that Ukraine has found this needle of Koche? This is where they need to strike, because this is what leads to the shutdown of enterprises, the shutdown of public utilities, garbage crises, when there will be nothing to haul the trash away with. This is a problem with air travel. This is a problem with the production of plastic and packaging. Because just a reminder, oil refining isn't just fuel. It's also feedstock for petrochemistry, for chemical manufacturing, and it's raw material for road construction, because bitumen is produced by oil refineries. That means road construction will come to a halt, repair work will stop. That means the production of all sorts of chemical goods will stop, right? I mean, things like plastic, disposable items, like some medical tubes, syringes, and there will simply be nothing in Russia. Russia will have to buy all of this. There is no money for that. That is why the strikes on oil refining, I repeat, forgive me for taking so long to answer your question, are the main result that has been achieved in 40 days. If in the next 40 days, finishing off what has already been destroyed so it cannot be restored becomes the main priority of this new phase of the strategic air battle, then Ukraine will achieve all of its goals.
I remember back in 2017 in Europe, there were so many so-called lawyers who kept pointing to an office in London saying there are Russians there. They're offering a lot of money to be made. They want to buy gasoline, any diesel, any gasoline. And it was clear back then that a full-scale invasion was being prepared. For some reason, I was reminded of how, before World War II, the Soviet Union and Nazi Germany were monitoring purchases. Yes, where more wool was being bought, where, in other words, they were trying to understand when the invasion would begin. It was the same thing. But we see that even that didn't help. This buying up, these stockpiles. They're even using North Korean missiles now because obviously they can't produce their own. But there is also another problem, which is hunger. Because there is no gasoline, which means farmers don't have the ability to work and harvest the crops. And what is the situation here? To what extent is this being felt in the fields?
Look, again, I don't want anyone to interpret my words right now as me discussing, and certainly not, God forbid, condemning any changes in vectors aimed at destroying logistics in Russia and so on. Yes, that is not my task. I can only say, looking back, that if what happened in the first week of August had been pushed back by 2 weeks while they were dealing with wild berries, and wild berries had been moved to, say, August, then there would already be an agricultural crisis right now. And Putin would already be running around like a scalded cat thinking, what am I going to feed people in 2027? But because most of the harvest is gathered in July and August, and there are still some reserves thanks to the fact that things were restored here and there and so on, because Ukraine, in principle, by and large, paused such a massive attack on oil refineries for 2 weeks, and diesel was just running on the dregs in the pipeline. Then things started to be added little by little, and the majority of the harvest, in principle, has already been gathered. Right now, there's like preparation for winter sowing and so on and so forth. But if you do something about this right now, the effect will probably only be seen in 2028. But I mean, if this had been going on all July and there was no diesel fuel, because let me remind you, diesel fuel is in high demand, not just for agriculture. It's needed by mines to haul out raw materials, by metallurgical plants that transport ore on non-electrified railway trains, and so on. Then back in July, we would have had a situation where, look, let's figure this out. Are we having a harvest here, or are our factories, blast furnaces, quarries, and so on shutting down, right? But that didn't happen. So everything is in the hands of the planners, those strategists who are in Kiev or in other places where operations are being planned. And please, don't think that I'm trying to put pressure on anyone there. I'm just saying, looking back, analyzing and seeing everything that's happening in the information environment, in the Russian media, in the blogosphere, in the videos from farmers, and so on and so forth. For example, strikes on port infrastructure and logistics in the Black and Azov Seas have reduced exports by 30%. But at the same time, prices in Russia have fallen by 30, 40%. Farmers don't know what to do with their grain. Exports have been reduced. There was a possibility. There was a week, just last week, there were 7 days when there wasn't not a single shipment of wheat at all, for example, right? And moving on. How do we assess, on one hand, the drop in Russia's export revenues because food exports for Russia are worth approximately $35 billion? And at the same time, a crisis for farmers, right? At the same time, well, a farmer's crisis means grain has become cheaper. And perhaps if it has become cheaper, then it will have some kind of effect on inflation, for example, and something else. Or they will destroy part of the harvest, but they aren't destroying it, so where are they supposed to take it? All the linear grain elevators are full, there's nowhere even to unload it, and so on. And there are a lot of factors in all of this. Accordingly, every element, port infrastructure, oil refining, lubricants, warehouse complexes, and so on, has its pros and cons. And you could discuss this, argue endlessly, and you can't say that these people are right and those people are wrong. There is no single clear-cut answer here. The only clear-cut answer lies in one plane: no fuel. Russia has stopped.
Vyacheslav, and I will tell you that these successes at sea in the Black and Azov Seas are the merit of one person celebrating a birthday today, Robert Brovdi, call sign Madyar. He is celebrating his birthday today, and so congratulations.
I'll take this opportunity. I don't know Mr. Madyar personally, of course, but I join in the congratulations and express my admiration for the level of organization, of strategic thinking that this person demonstrates. He will go down in all the textbooks, and people will learn, and businessmen and everyone who's generally engaged in something creative will learn from his cases. That'll definitely happen.
We'll discuss the success of his long-range operations more in future broadcasts. Thank you.